day, not only the camp itself, which today has been a little bit rained out, if we have to be honest, and that's part of life sometimes, adjusting and adapting to the weather. But we'll talk a little bit about the camp. We'll talk a little bit about the camp process in a way and what we hope to accomplish during a spring break camp. So we'll be talking about that and many other things. And before we kind of continue, let me welcome you in here to, we're calling it the Clubhouse. I'm Alex Parra. Beside me, a very special guest, Coach Mike Carroll. First of all, Coach, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. How are you?
Good.
Yeah?
Good. Thanks. Yeah, doing good.
Trying to survive the weather today, right?
Yeah. It's a little bit wet, a little bit chilly, but we're making through. We're getting through.
So, Coach, a lot of this springtime, when we're talking about this with Norma, literally we've gone from cold to 80 degrees, back to a front moving through early this morning, rain and weather. It's just something we have to deal with. Where I'm going with it is often in the process of coaching, you've got to deal with the elements.
Yeah. You have to be, I firmly believe that one of the best things a coach can be is flexible.
Yeah.
And be able to adjust to the situation that is thrown at them, whether it be weather or number of players that you're going to have in a practice, because that can vary from practice to practice. So there's a lot of different variables that can come at you in a multitude of ways, and so coaches have to learn to be flexible and know how to handle that.
I'm here with Coach Mike Carroll, and Norma's going to tell me if our audio sounds good or if it sounds low. She's giving me finger signs. I don't know what those fingers mean, Coach.
As long as it's the proper one, we're okay.
She's throwing all kinds of things at me. So Norma's not in this segment, so our ratings just went up. Norma, if there are questions or comments for myself, mainly for our expert, Coach Mike, please let us know. And you're hearing a little bit of background noise because the kids are in right now. We've had a little bit of weather. They're also taking their snack time. Coach, when we have a spring break camp, and this year we've had over 100 kids register, so congratulations to you, your
Thanks.
staff, to all of us.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of a spring break camp? It's getting kids maybe out of their normal team training, having fun with it, but I'm sure there's also learning that goes along with it.
There's lots of learning. This spring break camp, for instance, is if you did all 5 days of spring break camp per hour, by the hour, it's the equivalent of 7 weeks of training.
Wow.
Yeah.
So say that again slowly. 7 weeks of training.
Yeah, one camp is the equivalent of 7 weeks of training in number of hours.
So how's that broken down? Well, you're right, number of hours. I agree with that. And what is the priority during these days? I mentioned the word fun, F-U-N,
right.
but it's also working on some things maybe you don't normally work.
That's exactly right.
On during your team training.
Yes. So anyone who knows about what we do or knows our methodology knows that I don't spend much time working on technical stuff. Right. Most of my stuff, the stuff that we work on, most of our methodology is built around positional play training, cognitive player development, making players intelligent.
And collectively.
Collectively as the group, right? We work on things at SG1 that can only be worked on in the collective, right? The types of things that kids can't work on their own. And so here, when you get 4 or 5 hours with a player, now I have time where I can work on more technical detail. We can work on 1v1 training. We can work on, the little bit of passing and receiving, more detailed type stuff that we would ask a kid normally to work on at home, a player to work on normally at home.
So given that, and given that different kids of different ages, that happens in a camp, had different skill levels, I think it's incumbent on a coach to learn to adapt that, right?
Yes.
And almost tailor-make, customize what that child has to hopefully accomplish that week. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, and I think that this is good for working camps is really good for coaches as far as an education standpoint. Right. I've worked a lot of camps in my day, and it is forced flexibility onto me to be able to say, okay, I need to separate these players from these players, and these two players are going to have to work together. And you find yourself actually at times with kids who are 3 years, maybe even 4 years apart, playing together, right? And so there are times where it becomes almost a schoolyard type situation, which is good for the kids. I mean, when we were growing up, we weren't separated by age when we played on the playgrounds, right? I mean, when we were the big kids, we played with younger kids. When we were the little kids, we played with bigger kids, right? And
I vividly remember that,
yeah,
Coach.
yeah.
Yes.
And so there's something to be said for that. So it's a situation to where the kids get a multitude of experiences, and coaches get to help develop themselves a little bit in that regard as well.
And that's an important piece. Coach, we were looking at a little bit of a video just a second ago from some of our coaches. Right now on screen we have Coach Diana, who's fantastic, but she's one of our many fantastic coaches here at SG1.
Yeah, we've got an all-star cast. If I don't want to brag a little bit. It's an amazing coaching staff. Coaches Diana, Coach Steven, Bruce, Christian, Hernan was out here. I mean, so we've got
Hernan is in that group of excellent coaches?
Hernan's fantastic.
Okay, if you say so.
I don't care what Coach Adam says. Hernan's fantastic.
He is.
And once more, all of us are on the same page. And that's really, really important. You don't have we're a true club in that there's a methodology, a pathway, a development, right? And whereas a lot of clubs are essentially just collections of teams each doing their own thing. And so if you're going to be a true club, having every coach on the same page, using the same terminology, using the same training methodologies, knowing so if I pass a team off from me to another coach, they know right where to pick up.
Sure.
And so it matters for the player to, when we switch coaches eventually, when they switch coaches, to have it be as seamless as possible.
Makes sense. If you're just tuning in, thank you for following us here, SG1 Live, on our YouTube channel. This morning from KISC, K International Sports Complex, we're wrapping up our spring break camp. With us, Coach Mike Carroll, our Director of Player Development, and so many other things. You talked about curriculum, you talked about language. That also is a process, Coach, and it doesn't happen overnight. My point is, it's consistency over time, so that all of us are starting to speak the same language, and like you said, making that transition from age group to age group, consistency, and that phrase that many of us use in this business, player development.
Right. So our coaches specialize in an age group, right? So like once the kid gets around U10, they don't play for me anymore, right? So my job is
not because you don't like it.
No. It's not because I don't like it or I can't do it. Right. It's because I want to specialize U6, U7, U8, U9, right? That's what I want to be specializing in. And the next coach is U10, U11, U12, U13.
And we'll take what you've developed.
Right, and they know exactly where I'm leaving off.
Sure.
And where they're supposed to pick up. And there's actually conversations that happen between me and the next coaches. Me and Bruce have conversations all the time. Where's this player at? What is this player up to? You know, those kinds of things. And I have those same conversations with Coach Diana and Coach Steven and coaches that are working with other teams that might even be in the same age group, to know if a player might be ready to start practicing with a team that's above, right? And so our goal is to progress the players, and that's actually how we judge success. If a player comes to us and he starts out on our fourth team, right, and then 3 seasons later he's made it to the second team, that's success. Right?
It is.
And that's steady improvement. So that's what we're looking for. Or in some instances, the entire team getting promoted and moving itself to the next level is a massive success.
That makes sense.
So there's a bunch of different ways to measure success as a club, but I think individual players improving is the best method to measure it.
Absolutely. One of our programs, Coach, which is kind of our entry program, is called the Rising Stars.
Yes.
And I know we talk about young men, young women, kids coming in at 4, 5, 6 years of age. One of the things you just mentioned, I think, to me, is important to talk about. In our Rising Stars program, it's not only about the age, but it's about the ability.
Right.
A player can move through the program pretty quickly if
Yeah.
he or she is ready for more.
Yeah, and the entry level is also, we have three-year-olds right now that are in Rising Stars. We have some 2019s.
They're better than Norma for sure.
Our 2019s.
The three-year-olds.
But it's a case-by-case basis. They were little brothers and sisters of kids that have been in our club, right? And so when I looked at them, I'm like, yeah, they can jump in.
Coach, I'm gonna interrupt you and jump to something. How early should someone begin? And there's I've seen all kinds of schools of thought.
Right.
Part of this is the partnership between parents and your club.
Right.
We have to work hand in hand or foot in foot. We have to work together is the point I'm trying to make. But I think as early as you can get a young person, a young man, a young woman, a player touching that ball at home,
right,
that's the start of it.
Right. So I'm a big fan of Tom Byer's Soccer Starts at Home program, right? He's got a book out there, and it's just a matter of getting the culture in the house at the earliest of ages, right? And learning to enjoy having the ball, having the young child develop a relationship with the ball.
Right.
And the way Tom explains it is, the parent playing with the child, with the balls in the house. The kid will develop a love because of the love it has for the parent too, right? So it starts to develop the culture in the home at some point. And that's really the head start that kids need, right? Before they even come to club, you can tell which one of our young players and Rising Stars has a big brother, big sister that has kids in our club, right? That has big brothers and big sisters in our club. And so, because they've been around the ball, they've been around the game their whole life, and they come in with this massive advantage rather than some player who didn't. We had a couple of people who've come to us before, and they've said, my son is 7 years old, my son is 8 years old, daughter. They've never played before, right? And so that's kind of where the Rising Stars program comes in. But what I caution parents to do is to not compare that player to an 8-year-old who started with us when they were 4. That's a completely different 8-year-old.
Absolutely.
And so you'll see a massive gap in that if you look at our 2015s, which are U8s right now, right? So they're turning 8, they're 7 to turning 8 years old. They're probably a different 7 or 8-year-old than the average 7 or 8-year-old. Because someone that just might be getting started.
So let me I guess ask it the other way. Is it ever too late? And if you start if you pick up the sport at 20 years of age, that may be different than at 8, of course.
Right.
But is there a sweet spot, you think, when developmentally, and everybody's different, and we're all individuals, and you never say never. Is there a developmental moment when you say, look, by this age, if you can get in here in some way, and I don't mean SG1, I want kids to play the sport, to start playing the sport that they should. Is it the 5, 6, 7 age group? In my mind, maybe that's what triggers it, because you're still developing, you're still growing, but you're not so far behind. I don't want to say behind. There's some kids that are 8 years old that have been playing for 4 years.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's a big difference if you're just starting at 8.
Right. And if you're 9, 10, 11, 12, if you have a young player who's a young child who's 9, 10, or 11, you might want to start out at your local recreational type thing, just to see how they feel about it.
Sure.
And your local YMCA and whatnot, because at that level we're phasing out of Rising Stars at about U10, right? We're phasing out of that program, and so you'll want to get some experience somewhere. And I highly recommend your local YMCA, FFPS, Youth League, KD Youth kind of thing, and just helping them learn the game at that age. Now, the good news is that because they're that age, their cognitive abilities are pretty high, and they'll pick the game up pretty quick, right? The question is whether or not how they are physically.
Right.
Dexterity, coordination, those kinds of things.
Athleticism always helps, right?
It does, yeah.
Some of you, not me, ladies and gentlemen, are gifted athletes, and that can help you overcome some things. But certainly there's nothing like touching the ball, touches. Coach, to wrap up the segment, and we can't thank you enough,
Sure.
where do you see U.S. soccer today? And I'm throwing you a curveball, if
all right.
you will. There's a lot of talk about the priorities of U.S. soccer. It should always be the national team, that is going to demonstrate our success. I don't necessarily look at it that way, and my point is we have to continue growing the sport. You do a great job every day of growing the sport in our country. Right. Because I'll use this term, and it's not a negative term. We're doing it. You're doing it at the grassroots level.
Right.
You're developing players. One day, maybe, and it's not because of your lack of ability, but because of other factors, he or she may end up on a national team. But there's the 99% that will never get there. My point is, what are we doing to develop the sport, to grow it, and what can we do better? And I hope the Federation at times listens and takes note of what we're trying to do at the club level, at the youth level, because I feel sometimes that gets lost in translation, and other things, and this is Alex preaching.
Yeah.
Other things, Coach, like sponsorships and money become a lot more of a priority than actually developing kids. So does that make sense? And that's my rant.
Yeah.
Maybe you agree or disagree.
No,
that's why I wanted to ask the question.
I can tell you what I think U.S. soccer can do better. They need to free us up to be able to get paid for our development, right? One of the big things that happens in Europe that brings costs down is compensation to local clubs for players being developed.
You mean
right?
for federations?
Yes. Yeah, and if allowing us to get training compensation and things like that when the Dynamo pick up a player, for instance, from us,
sure.
Right? That happens if a player keeps getting sold all the way up to, I believe it's age 26 in Europe. That money, every time, so take for instance when Christian Pulisic was sold for $70 million from Borussia Dortmund to Chelsea, his local club, PA Classics, got exactly $0 for that, right?
Is that fair? Is that right?
He spent the majority of his training years with them. So in Europe, they would have gotten paid a portion of that $70 million,
sure,
right?
Sure.
And so that helps keep costs low in Europe. Training compensation isn't really paid down to the clubs here, the local clubs here. And so this is why we have our pay-to-play system.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you, Coach. I think there's one thing that is true, which is this, that, to be honest with you, the Federation actually takes money from every youth registration.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
It goes the opposite direction.
And it's something people don't know. My understanding is that every time a player registers under U.S. soccer, they're subsidizing U.S. soccer. So it's the opposite.
Yeah.
There's no trickle down. It's, oh, look at me, I have the opportunity to play under U.S. soccer. Let me give you money. So that's my understanding, and I think it's correct, and I think it's factual. That has to change.
Yeah.
You're suggesting, and I agree with you, it has to come the other way.
So training compensation / solidarity payments I think is something that can happen overnight. They don't need. You don't have to change the entire system. You don't have to change. See, a lot of people say, pro-rel in our, promotion relegation in our professional leagues would be helpful. And I agree that it would be, but that's going to require an entire restructuring of our system.
It is. And MLS
training compensation doesn't
MLS
do that.
is a single entity business.
Like all of our pro leagues here.
And they're not going to want to lose that revenue, whether they're the Houston Dynamo or not. And I'll say that because it's a team that has been awful almost for a decade. But you know what? This is the beauty of American sports. You can be awful on the field and still make money.
Yes. Yeah, you can be.
That's a topic for another day.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like every other American sport is really what it is. In that regard, soccer's not special from American football, from baseball, from the NBA or hockey, right? It's not special in that regard. So I don't see that changing because of our culture here in the United States. If it does change, it's going to be a single entity change. MLS, I could see the MLS acquiring the USL, right, and then instituting their own internal, but it's
Sure.
still the MLS. It's still a single entity.
Got it.
Right? It's,
Yeah.
it's not an open system. But training compensation is just a decision. It could happen tomorrow,
Yeah.
and it could lower the cost for everything. And on top of that, if getting training compensation, that would completely change the reason why or how players are developed, right? Now, if money was coming in from players actually truly being developed, rather than what looks like development, which is winning, right? Youth clubs winning is very much mistaken for development.
Agree. And they're not one and the same.
Right. I mean, if you look at me, I'm 3-6 on the season this season right now, right?
A failure.
But all of our teams are playing a year up, top bracket, all these other things. And what I'm asking them to do is hard. And so winning isn't really my...
And I'll jump in, Coach.
Yeah.
I see many clubs and I see many teams that have actually fooled themselves into believing they're succeeding because they've watered down who they play against.
Right.
Just the opposite.
Right.
I've seen it so many times. We are undefeated for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're playing in the lowest possible bracket.
Yeah.
And you're the oldest kids, being together the longest, and you're not challenging yourself.
Yeah, we're the champion of the 5th bracket. Yeah.
And when people realize, oh, there's 4 more brackets, and on top of that a Champions League, and on top of that a regional league,
Right.
you really realize where you are
Yeah.
in your level of competition.
And so my goal isn't to win a bunch of games. My goal is to continue to push and challenge, and it's going to be hard. Like I said, what we're asking our players to do is very hard, right? It's not easy, and my job is to continue to make them a little uncomfortable, right? It's true. I mean, they have to become comfortable being uncomfortable, and so that's why we're constantly challenging them and pushing them and trying to get our players to the very next level, and understanding what the highest level looks like. The highest level here in Houston is much different than the highest level in Dallas.
Agreed.
Right, and in the age group. And so to push kids, if I want to be a top bracket club in Dallas in my own age group, I have to play a year up top bracket here, right? So when we go to Dallas, I can compete there, and that's why when people ask, why are you doing it? There's a reason, because I'm really trying to keep us at the top, and so that's.
Forgive me, Coach.
great.
Often losing is as important in the development process as winning.
Yeah.
And maybe even more so.
Yeah. Well, it
Especially
builds.
if you're actually challenging yourself against top level competition.
Yeah, it builds grit, right? I learned this a while back when I had a team. We won 32 straight games, right? And you think you're doing pretty good.
What age group?
It was 2012, but the 2012s were U8s.
Okay.
Right, and we won 32 straight games, and then we went and played at Copa Rayados, and we were a good team, but we had a team come in and punch us in the mouth, right? And so it wasn't because we were worse than them from a talent perspective. Our players just got used to going 60-70%, right? And not having to push themselves very hard. And I've told myself I'm never letting that happen again. I can't let players think that just because we're so much talented and we win all these games that we can go 60-70%, and then when somebody really strong comes up against you,
You don't know what to do.
yeah. And so I think it was Mike Tyson that said everybody has a plan until he gets punched in the mouth, right? And
That's one of the many things Mike Tyson said.
but it's the one that makes a point. And so I'm just always trying to push them. And so if we want to develop that grit, that heart, that fight in a player, right? I think you have to constantly push them. You have to constantly challenge them. So you always have to keep finding the next level for your group.
Well, Coach, you're always challenging us here at SG1. We thank you not only for your involvement this week with the spring break camp, but also with many of your roles here, player development, developing our coaches as well. So, Coach Mike Carroll, a big part of why SG1 is where we are 11 years into our history. And I think there's another whole chapter that's going to be written here in the next couple of years, Coach. I'm already seeing it. I'm already seeing the little ones. I call them the little ones.
Yeah.
They're 5, 6, 7-year-old that played better than I ever played at any level, which is amazing. And that's also, to me, quickly, Coach, a sign of how U.S. soccer is developing.
Yeah, no, we're good.
I mean, at those ages, we never compared 20 years ago against Barcelona's academy, for instance. Things are changing, and that's a good thing.
I'm telling you that right now, there's a lot of talent in this country. And there's some really, really good little players out there. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see where we're at as a country in the next decade. I'm really looking forward to it. Even if you look at the MLS academies in like U17, U16, U15, there's some really good players out there doing some really awesome things. And I'm really excited to see what 2026 looks like for us.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm gonna bet that our 2026 national team has a lot of fresh faces on it.
And that would be a good thing.
Yeah.
That's what we want. So, Coach Mike, it's a pleasure. Thank you, sir, for being with us here on set. As we wrap up another SG1 Live, today we're live from Kidd International Sports Complex as we're wrapping up our spring break camp. So, thank you to Coach Mike. Thank you to our production staff. I guess I'll say thank you to Norma if she deserves a thank you or not. And speaking of Norma, we'll be back in a little while, kind of wrapping up another segment, doing another segment to kind of wrap up our day here at KISC. So on behalf of all of us, on behalf of Coach Mike, I'm Alex. Thank you for joining us. Until next time when we meet again here on SG1 Live.